You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hello, this is Dana Cowin, and you are listening to Progressive Hedonist. Today, my guest is a chef who has changed the world by looking at zero waste. How can we eliminate the bin, or what we in America would call the garbage can, from restaurants? That means everything has to be either used, reused, upcycled, recycled, you name it. Just at the end of the day, the week, the month, there is no waste leaving that restaurant. My guest today is Doug McMaster, who puts this into practice in the most beautiful way at his restaurant in London, Silo. Let's just get on to the interview. Well, I'm so excited to talk to you today about your zero waste restaurant, Silo, and the philosophy that went into it. I'd love to hear about the moment for you when you went from thinking, working in fine dining is amazing to, wait a minute, there's something else that I want to pursue.
Yeah, well, I can't say that I ever thought that fine dining was amazing. The greater the restaurant, the more it felt like a factory. I once wrote an article called "The Best Chefs Can't Cook, Although Everything is Perfect?" ? It was a commentary on, when you work in 3 Michelin star restaurants, it's more of a conveyor belt than a kitchen. And you do 2 or 3 jobs all day, and that's all you do. And I was working in a restaurant in Sydney in 2010, and it was one of the world's best restaurants. And all I did for 80 hours a week was pig's head and squid. And it was just like working in a factory.
It's amazing that it didn't turn you off pig's head forever, which I know it did not.
No, though I can still see those faces staring up at me, judging me for my intervention and the sort of extraordinary, irresponsible waste that was created from that system around me. And the cooking that I myself was doing in that kitchen was generating mountains of misunderstood waste, and all for a few forgettable moments of gluttony with a criminal act. And I can't say that I really understood how criminal it was at the time. I knew something was wrong. There was some kind of cosmic injustice, and there was something in my subconscious that was telling me that there was something wrong in this place. But it was actually at that time that I got out. It was the experience less so of the waste, more so of the violence that occurred in these kitchens, especially that particular one that drove me out of that environment. And I actually threw a quail at the sous chef's head because he was bullying me and had been bullying me for so long. And I just lost my temper, which never happens. I never lose my temper. And I did, which was a very rare thing. And I had this quail, the whole bird, and launched at his head, and he ran at me like a rugby player, and it was this big thing. And that was the sort of like moment of, this has gone too far. But as if by some force of cosmic serendipity, I met an artist at that exact time, and he was the one that opened my mind to the future, which is a zero waste food system.
And that was Joost Bakker.
Yeah, Joost is one of my best friends, and he is a total genius. One of the most underrated geniuses on the planet. Everybody's obsessed with tech, and he's nature. And it's like, for me, there's these polarizing religions on the planet, tech and nature. And nature's sort of underappreciated, kind of misunderstood kind of religion. It's my religion. It's what I ascribe to. And I think it's something very powerful to believe in.
I know you've said that we are nature. How did that idea first make its way to you?
That's a great question. Really, really, really good. It was a series of events, but it all began with Joost. And it began with him saying to me, could you operate without a bin? Now, a bin is a fictionalized aspect of reality that we've designed into the world because of bad design. Bad design is the lack or the absence of sustainability. And now where the absence of sustainability proliferates in the world, bins follow suit. In the most unsustainable systems, lots and lots of bins are required. I'm sort of jumping ahead with a few revelations there, but it was the bin that Joost said, can you take away the bin? So what happened there was a very practical process of elimination. I was in this unique circumstance of like, right, I don't have a bin. What necessitates a bin? Mm-hmm. So it's like single-use plastic, and then this and this and this and this and this. So it's like, right, I basically identified a few, mostly plastic, polystyrene and other single-use materials. And then I was like, okay, right. So to dodge that, I need to go to the origin, to farmers, to fishermen, to foragers, and to work in reusable vessels directly with the origin. Later on, I would describe that as nature. Those people are part of the natural rhythms of the planet. They're fishing, they're farming, that's nature, So I'm working with nature and working in direct supply chains and working in vessels that can be endlessly reused. That's a sort of like pre-industrial food system going back to the sort of early 19th century where there wasn't a bin. And then I was like, but what is waste? Where did it come from? And, obviously, how do we get rid of it? I just had this vision of like a bin in the jungle. And I realized there is no bin in the jungle. The bin does not exist. And then it occurred to me that waste is a human thing. We've designed it into the world because of a poor understanding of nature. And that crude understanding of nature damages nature. We are damaging nature. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. Later on, many years later, I finally was able to describe what is sustainability. And it's not something that you ever hear. People don't ever describe what is sustainability. Never.
It's a very squishy word.
Yeah, I don't think anyone understands what it is. And I didn't. And, I was thinking about bins a lot, but what is a bin relative to sustainability? Mm-hmm. That's a good question. Basically, it's in a single word, it's balance. If you think about a jungle, you think about all these creatures living and dying and eating each other, and there is this ruthless environment, but there is balance. There is a balance of species. There is a balance of life. And a jungle is the most abundantly alive environment on Earth. And thinking about humans, it's like, an example of a sustainable human system would be a regenerative farm. This is just one example because it's a good one, I think. But if you think about, 2 to 10 farmers farming a plot of land, and they're really passionate about healing potentially dead soil or creating more life within soil, more fungus, more mycorrhizae, more biodiversity, more insects, more life. That is beyond sustainability. You're creating a net positive effect on that environment.
So interesting, because what you describe, the idea that we've invented waste, and now your job, if you will, is to design waste out of the system. But somewhere I feel like you must have fallen in love with the earth, somewhere at the foundation, because you're quite understandably, and I share this, angry at how far we've come from that pre-industrial truth, which is man understanding that we are beholden to nature and should live with it. And I'm just curious if you have does that resonate with you at all?
Oh, 110%. That is exactly what has happened, because as soon as these sort of truths appeared in my mind when taking the bin away, it became immediately obvious to me that we are part of this system. And the more we deny we're part of that system, the more we damage the system, the more we damage nature, the planet, ourselves. We're not just damaging the planet, we're damaging ourselves. We're a very ill race. And understanding the greatest wound in human history is thinking that we are not of nature. Anthropocentric is a word that means that we think we're above or separate to nature. And yeah, that is the greatest mistake in human history. And I was very lucky to have found this truth, and it is like finding it, because it's not a rhetoric that is common. You go on with your lives, and you're part of economies, you're just trying to survive and feed your family and all these things, and like no one's teaching these things. And I was just in this very unique circumstance where I started thinking about it and being like, whoa, it's like waking up from like in some sort of Matrix style scene, but it's the truth. And the more I think about it, the more I find fulfillment in the pursuit of it, being part of nature and realizing that, and doing things, whether it's zero waste food systems or, working with the land or breathing, just doing breath work is kind of going backwards into nature, backwards, not in a negative, just from the way in which human species have moved away from it. It's beautiful and it's so fulfilling, and I couldn't imagine my life without it. We try and build these lives through industrialization that create comfort and choice and prosperity, but the truth that we're not aware of is that there's no such thing as perfect comfort or perfect happiness. It's all, again, balance.
Let's talk about silo a little bit, which from the sourcing to the creating of the food to the creating of the materials that you use in the restaurant, like the wine bottles that turn into porcelain, to the design, everything is part of this larger system. There's nothing that's out of place. I'm sure there are things that are imperfect, but nothing is misaligned. And so I'd love to hear about how you develop the menus and the ideas for the food, because the food, it's so holistic.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's maybe good to start with an example, because if I was to say we design our menu or the restaurant from a circumstance or a philosophy, it's kind of a bit vague and a bit sort of lofty and woo-woo. So I'll start with a dish. Once upon a time, we didn't have a bin, and we were trying to figure out, right, how do we make bread and butter? And so we realized that everything we were getting comes from a farm, because when you deal directly, we can work in these reusable vessels. Yeah, so you go to the farm and you realize that the farmers don't necessarily sell flour, they sell wheat, because wheat is from nature. Flour is not. It's a process that creates flour. And we were just dealing with the origin, the farmer, nature, and we were getting whole wheat. And there's lots of wonderful aspects to doing that. The flavor is so much more superior, milling your own flour, and the nutrition is like 1,000 times better for you. So we were getting whole wheat and we were milling our own flour, and it was like, great, this is so interesting, and the flavors are just so much greater. However, milling it, and we're like, right, the bread's quite heavy. All right, so we'll sift some of the bran out of the flour. Great, we've got nice, beautiful, fresh like flour that makes beautiful sourdough. Great. But we've got all this bran building up. And you're a chef and you're like, I've never used bran before. Like, what do you make bran with? Bran flakes? I don't know. We don't want to serve bran flakes. Okay, so there's a bit of a circumstance going on. Meanwhile, we're getting cream from a cow in a stainless steel pail, and the dairy farmers bringing it in directly. And so we've got this cream, and we're like, right, we need butter to go with bread. So we're like, well, we'll churn the cream. We know how to do that. Vaguely, this is 10, 12 years ago. So he's churning butter, and that was an ordeal and a splashy mess everywhere. And we had buttermilk as a byproduct of butter. And we're like, okay, another circumstance of this system, of not having a bin. Okay, interesting. So what do we do with bran? What do we do with buttermilk? So you start designing a dish or aspects of dishes from the circumstance. And you've got to ask, what does bran want to be? Bran doesn't want to be a fluffy loaf because it's heavy and dense and oily. Okay, so we'll create something more in line with a dense, oily thing like a wafer. great. We've got a wafer. Maybe that could be an ice cream sandwich wafer. Brilliant. Buttermilk. Right, let's turn that into dulce de leche because it's stable, and we can keep it, and it's just multifunctional and versatile. And then we're like, oh, maybe we can make an ice cream from the dulce de leche to go into an ice cream sandwich with a bran wafer. Boom, we've got a dessert. And it's a dessert that finishes the end of the menu, and it's the byproduct from the first side of the menu. And so we're innovating to close loops, and we're also bookending the menu with the byproducts of bread and butter. And there is this kind of poetry, this circularity that is so satisfying as creatives and chefs and the guests as well.
It shows the closed loop. Everything you do is a closed loop.
Yeah, and one of the important words in that sort of passage was values, and there's all kinds of values. One of the values is beauty, and to me, a beautiful thing is zero waste. I think it's beautiful. I really do. Like, not throwing things away is just beautiful as a principle. Now, another way of looking at beauty is like physical space. So a room, a shelf, whatever it is around you, an environment can be beautiful, beautifully designed, made from great materials by great artisans, etc. And from day one, I was like, Silo needs to be beautiful. It needs to be delicious, and the service needs to be fun, and the overall experience needs to be beautiful. And I think that is one of the reasons that we've been quite successful.
I'd love to hear about the design of certain elements in the restaurant, because I know you use mycelium, I know there's seaweed, I know there's sheets of wood that are made from upcycled plastic. If you could just walk me through the space a little bit in the same way that you would walk me through a recipe.
Yeah. So when Silo first opened, there was lots of circumstances like the bread and the butter. We were imperfect with not receiving plastic. So we had a lot of plastic, and was like, well, what can we do with plastic? In the same circular mentality. And it's like, oh, maybe we could melt it into a thing that we need. And so we spoke to a friend of mine who did it for a sculpture for a degree in her university thing. And I said to her, could you make a plate or a platter out of all this plastic? And she was like, yeah, I can do that. But yeah, and so that was the beginning. Her name was Louise Tilley, and she turned our waste plastic into a platter. And then we would be making, I don't know, just more simple things like furniture from pieces of wood that we found on the street or that was surplus. And then that wasn't very comfortable, so we made cushions out of waste denim and stuffed it with tights from ripped tights, and all manner of crazy ideas. And a lot of them are not still with us. A lot of these ideas were bad. A lot of them, probably more than 50%. But then a lot of them were like absolutely brilliant. People would often describe them like, this is absolute genius. And I'm like, it's not necessarily genius. We're just reacting to circumstances around us, and that's all it is. And so over the years, there's been hundreds, probably multiple hundreds of different products, whether they're like crazy food products or like material design products. And in Silo London now, 10 years later, there is over 100 very, very beautiful finished kind of products that are made from waste, from our system and systems around us. Companies like Smile Plastics are making our bar top out of post-industrial plastic on a massive, massive scale. We've got seaweed pendants made from seaweed that has been extracted the nutrients from, and then it's a byproduct, so we turn that into pendants. Mycelium furniture, which grows over spent beer grains from the brewing industry. Italian leather shoe trimmings that have been pulverized and then spread into this incredible material on the fascia of our bar. Yeah, there are so many. We actually, in lockdown, had a shop because we had so many people in our network that were upcycling waste materials that we had a shop, and that had 150 different products, from soap dishes to bread trays to chopping boards to, I don't know, so many different things. It's not waste. It has this metamorphic moment where it turns into something far greater that is not going to be wasted. So it ceases to become waste.
Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. In Northern Australia, there's a different approach to raising high-quality beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and Northern Territory, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. Westholme stewards 16 million acres of rangeland guided by their natural ecosystem. They're led by a belief that if they balance the needs of their cattle with the needs of the environment, both can thrive. Westholme's team of rangeland experts and nature managers use a variety of tools to monitor and respond to the welfare of the environment, like satellites that assess grass health and on-the-ground research. Cattle are happier when they have the freedom to forage and explore, so Westholme ensures that they can roam wild, foraging at will for the first 2 to 3 years of their lives. Their cows graze on native grasses like Mitchell grass, which is only found in Australia, along with dozens of other plants, herbs, and seasonal legumes. The result is a high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia and a flavor suited to complement any cuisine. Westholme believes that when nature leads, flavor follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
You said people come for the beauty of the experience. In fact, you don't have front of the house say, welcome to the sustainable experience. It's like, welcome to Silo. And you've taken sustainability out of their language. And people who come, they come for all the reasons, but they don't come first and foremost for the sustainability. And I'm curious why you put sustainability in the background rather than the foreground, since it's literally why you exist.
Well, in a utopian future or a utopian past, we wouldn't have made the mistakes that we've made as a species, and the word shouldn't exist. We wouldn't need to talk about zero waste if we just had never wasted, or we wouldn't have to talk about sustainability if we were already sustainable. And Silo is aspirational in those terms. We're trying to create an ideal food system to demonstrate that it is possible. And that is so fundamental to who we are and what we do that we don't think of ourselves as sustainable. We just are. We're just chefs. It's just cooking. And that's the way it should be and should have always been. Organic food shouldn't be labeled organic food. Non-organic food should be labeled toxic. It's like glyphosate all over non-organic, food. That's a problem. And that should be like smoking kills on a front cover of a smoking cigarette packet. It should be, processed GMO doused in glyphosate, food grown in nutrient deficient dead soil. That should be all over the front packet of everything that isn't organic. The vast majority of our guests just want to come and have a nice time, and they don't want to be told about sustainability. Now, this is the kind of paradoxical thing with Silo, is that it's a restaurant, and restaurants are fundamentally pleasure seeking, and you go there for pleasure, and indoctrination by a bunch of singular-minded, nature-loving chefs front of house isn't what you want on the menu. You want a really nice experience with your friends, and you're celebrating a birthday or it's a date, and you're more interested in talking to your guests about what you saw in the news today, or it's not about sight, it's not about us. We're serving the guests pleasure. And that's something that I want to respect and draw the line in front of. But when they say, I heard this is, doesn't have a bin or blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, okay, now we're talking. If you don't respect that line and you cross that line, which we've done, all it takes is one or two servers to not know that. They will cross the line and have crossed the line, especially in the early days. And we were labeled preachy, holier than thou, lots of negative descriptions of silo. And so, yeah, we've sort of learned the hard way.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your thoughts on diet. It's not, the center of where you live, but it's very interesting to me that there's elements of paleo and elements of vegan, which most people would be like, ooh, mind blown. What do you mean?
Yeah, well, I believe in a diet that is natural. And natural is different in different parts of the world. There are different people with different genetic makeups, and so different diets. Some people really do suit a vegan diet, some people don't, and so on. And we have different environments with different seasons. But essentially, one of the questions that I always ask, and again, it can sound a bit sort of lofty at first, but it really does make a lot of sense. And it's like, what does nature want? Does nature want humans to be vegan? Does nature want plastic? Does nature want processed foods? It's a really simple question, but essentially, whether it's coming from a biodynamic farm or a regenerative farm, if that soil is teeming with microbial life, that's what nature wants, clearly, because nature is prosperous. Nature is exploding with life in the soil. Now, you can look at it through the lens of paleo or vegan, or it doesn't really matter. If there's life in food, we are going to live well, prosperously. And it is that simple.
I just want to finish with one question, which is, what is ahead for you? Once you've created these systems, you have this philosophy, you have the restaurant, where do you want to take this from here?
So we're working on a restaurant in Mexico City.
Wow.
Arca Tierra and Tuétano. So Arca Tierra are basically the most productive farm on the planet. Lucio, the head of the farm, would probably say it's the second most productive farm on the planet. But the point is, it is one of the best farms on the planet. And that's something that Silo's never had, a farm attached to it. We work with amazing farmers, but this is the next level of farming and agriculture and supply chains, and that's Arca Tierra. And then you've got Tuétano, who are a restaurant group, because we're based here, and so Tuétano and Arca Tierra and Silo are going to open a zero waste restaurant called Baldeo.
And how do you think about air miles? Like if you have a project in another country, you'll be on a plane, maybe more.
Yeah. No, it's another sort of paradox. The question is, and I'll ask yourself this question, would you rather me open a zero waste restaurant in Mexico City and fly twice a year or not?
I mean, I, for myself, haven't been able to really answer this question, because Progressive Hedonist has events all over America. And those events, I'm hoping, will make more people subscribe to this lifestyle that we've been talking about. So I struggle, but I'm still on a plane.
Having this kind of conversation with anyone, I really don't think anyone would dispute us flying around the world if we're trying to improve the world. Again, it's entirely subjective, but I really believe that we're trying to do a good thing. And some people might say, oh, it's all waste. Some people might, I don't know, but I know that it's the right thing to do, and it's a drop. It really is a drop in the ocean when you look at every other bit of air travel and impact on the environment. It's really, really, really a drop in the ocean.
Well, I'm very excited to hear that there will be more than one opportunity to eat at a Silo zero waste restaurant.
Silo is a living being named Silo. This will be Baldeo.
What does Baldeo mean?
Wasteland.
Oh, great. That's such a good name.
But it actually comes from a French farmer philosopher. The direct translation is wasteland, but it's more like land that is not understood. It's like not doing anything, and there's potential in that space. That's the more accurate Spanish translation of what Baldeo means.
Well, cheers to you and all the potential within all of the things you're excited about. I've loved talking to you. I will at some point be getting on a plane so I can experience one of the two of your amazing projects. So thank you so much for your time.
My absolute pleasure. It's been great to speak to you.